Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community.
This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network, and it all revolves around you.
Welcome to the Functional Forum. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello and welcome to the Functional Forum. It is September 2023 and I'm super excited for a special episode. Never before have we had an episode featuring the career of one person, but I thought it would be an obvious time for us to focus on the one-woman evolution of medicine that is Dr. Robin Berzin of Parsley Health. Now, Dr. Berzin and I actually met in 2012, years before the Functional Forum and years before the beginning of Parsley Health. We both lived in New York. And even back then, I could see that she was fully committed to being a transformative agent in medicine. And so I wanted to start today's Functional Forum by just sharing a little bit of where this all began. So in the early days of the Functional Forum, actually in the second episode of the Functional Forum, Dr. Berzin came on to talk about digital health. At that point, she was a digital entrepreneur, and she was just starting her career as a practitioner and was practicing at Dr. Jeff Morrison's center in New York, one of the premier integrative centers. And later in that year, I knew that she was, starting to think about what her own practice would be. And around the dates of the first Evolution of Medicine Summit, we did a big launch at ABC Home in New York at Deepak Home Base. And the two keynote speakers that night were Dr. Leo Galland, who is still, such a legend. And just as a note on that, go back and listen to his podcast that we did last year or even 2 years ago on long COVID, because he was so spot on. But Dr. Robin Berzin also spoke that day, and she spoke about digital transformation of healthcare and what digital can do for medicine. And it was the very beginning of talking about what she would build at Parsley Health. And I thought, just to kick this off, let's go back and check out some of the best bits from that talk to give you an idea of how early this idea started. Enjoy.
Now, I want everyone in the room to raise your hand if you have a smartphone. This is iPhone, Android, everybody? Okay. And now I want you to raise your hand if you saw a doctor in the past year. So this could be a dermatologist, primary care, emergency room, what have you. Great, everyone. Now I want you to think for a second, which was more efficient, convenient, delightful, or empowering? Your interaction with your doctor or your interaction with your smartphone? Because for me, I recently had an experience, I went to my OBGYN annual visit, and it was none of those things. She was an hour late, and when I did finally see her, the visit was about 15 minutes, and I got so flustered that I forgot to ask the question that I actually had to ask her. And despite the fact that I've been seeing her for 5 years since medical school, she definitely didn't recognize me. And I left thinking something that I think about a lot because I'm interested in tech, that, wow, medicine really needs to take a cue from design, from technology, and be a little bit more like my smartphone, be a little bit more like this iPad I'm holding. So in the design process, in technology, it goes something like this. You identify a problem, you dream up a wild and crazy solution, you build a prototype, you iterate on that prototype, you throw caution to the wind and ignore all of the obstacles, and then you see what happens from there. And generally, the best solutions that come are user-generated, meaning they're built by the people who truly understand the problems. And from there, you see what your awesome new invention can do. So we've seen in the past 7 years, the iPhone actually came out only 7 years ago, which is extraordinary. We've seen our communication revolutionized. The banal correspondence of everyday life is sexy and fun and shareable and efficient, and that's happened in 7 years. And this is why I think functional medicine is so absolutely amazing. Because functional medicine is a paradigm shift because it's a redesign, fundamentally, of primary care. Now, like many of the doctors have spoken here tonight have shared with you, we focus on getting to the root cause of disease instead of just treating the symptom. We always spend time with our patients. There are no 15-minute visits. We use natural therapies that are sustainable wherever possible, like diet and lifestyle and botanical medicines and supplements that have a much lower risk profile than synthetic drugs. And our communication is always a two-way street because we depend on our patients taking responsibility for their health. So in this way, functional medicine is already more convenient and efficient and delightful and empowering to our patients because we have to be. That's what we do. We empower people to live healthier lives. We empower them to live their way to wellness. And in order for us to have functional medicine become the standard of care, which is one of my personal goals and something that I think we can all agree that we want to see happen, I think one of the things that functional medicine has to do is it has to become more like our iPhones. It has to become more prevalent, and it has to become just as wonderfully designed. Okay, tall order. How do we do that? How does functional medicine build to scale and fill in this gap of 45,000 missing doctors? Well, as James mentioned, we have a huge, amazing thing happening next month. The Functional Medicine Center at the Cleveland Clinic will open its doors on October 1st, and that's a major line in the sand to have a partnership with an academic institution of that caliber. It's awesome. But I think the real impact has to happen on the demand side, and I don't think that we can go one hospital at a time. I actually think we need to follow the lead of a company that a lot of people love to hate. It's called Walmart. And Walmart has opened a series of primary care clinics in its stores in the Southeast, and I think we need to follow suit and go beyond the hospital system into the community. We need to go where the people need us, and we need to reach people where they are as functional medicine providers. Okay, so I'm supposed to talk about tech, and I will, I promise. I'm not going to talk about the microbiome. I'm going to talk about tech. And it's this reaching people where they are where digital technology really comes in. Because the tools that we need to reach people where they are, as we've shown by everyone raising their hands earlier, in all of your pockets right now. 65% of Americans, and this number is climbing every day, have a smartphone. The average number of devices people have is 4. And as James mentioned, the iWatch comes out tomorrow. And you guys are probably thinking, gosh, I just want to throw my iPhone out the window. But if I threw your smartphone out the window right now, you would kill me. And you would run after it and go get it. And the answer is not to throw these things out the window. It's to work as a functional medicine community to harness the power of what these digital tools have that are in everyone's hands already and reach more people like my patients Alfred and Mary. So there's some things that functional medicine already does really well, and these are things that digital technology can help us do even better, or help us do at least at scale. So the first one, as Dr. Lippman mentioned, is education. We are teachers, and what we do as functional medicine doctors a lot of the time is we teach people how to eat, sleep, move, shop, to live a healthier life. So someone like Alfred, I was thinking about him, you know, a lot of the changes that I helped him make, he could have made on his own if he had that information at his fingertips. And the exciting thing is that in a lot of ways he already does. Sites like Mind Body Green are aggregating wellness information, the best of the best from around the world. Apps from the Environmental Working Group that Heather has been a part of, like Skin Deep and the Food Database, are letting people know at the point of sale when they buy their products or their food what toxins are in them. This is huge. A lot of what we do all day is as functional medicine doctors, is spend time educating people on how to live healthier. And these tools are there to help our patients and help us. Now, another thing that we do as functional medicine doctors is we spend time making people just aware. We build consciousness. And it's a really, really hard thing to do. And wearables actually get a bad rap, the Fitbits and the Fuel Bands and the Ups, and a lot of people are saying, oh, I use these things for 2 weeks and I throw them out. What's the point of tracking your steps? But I think we have to remember that this is like the 80s cell phone in the era of wearables that we're in right now. These things are going to get smaller and they're going to be everywhere. And the era of the Internet of Things is only just beginning, meaning that basic consumer goods are equipped with data collection devices that transmit information wirelessly. This is only beginning. And so if you can get your patients or anyone just wearing something that shows them day to day that different, what their stress biomarkers are, whether or not how many calories they're eating. This is just another way for us to help cultivate awareness for our patients when we're not there. And that's a huge part of what functional medicine does. And then there's something that, we take for granted, and that's mobile. And I think about Mary and how it took her a lot to get to her office, every week at one point, and how there really are already tools out there that I could reach her without her having to come to me. And this is where telemedicine comes in. And with telemedicine, functional medicine can scale. We can reach everyone. There are tools like Skype and Google Hangout and Doctor On Demand and Zoom that allow us to reach more people at scale now. So those are the things that functional medicine does well that digital technology can help us scale. But there are a couple of things that I think that we don't do so well that are some big challenges that we need to face and step up to if we're going to make functional medicine the standard of care, if we're going to help all of these millions and thousands of people live healthier lives. So the first one is tracking outcomes. And this is a big talk right now across medicine and conventional medicine as well, because a lot of people are about to not get paid if they don't actually prove that what they're doing is working. And sometimes in functional medicine, I think we're sort of a little bit outside of that. We don't necessarily operate within that system, but the reason that we as functional medicine physicians need to track outcomes is not about that. It's because we have to prove that this works. We know it works. All of us sitting here, we know it works. We do this every day. We see incredible outcomes in our patients. But until we have the data and we use big data and big data analytics to prove it and show the world, they don't have to believe us, and we need to make sure that they do. And then the second big challenge that I think we really have to face to scale functional medicine to everyone is something of the elephant in the room in functional medicine, but I'm just going to talk about it, and it's affordability. So the reality is that I can't actually afford to see myself, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And most of my friends can't afford to see me. And we cannot reach the many, many Americans or people across the world who need to see us if we cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. We just can't. So what I would say that we need to do is harness the digital technologies that expand our reach and offer functional medicine services to the public at affordable prices. Say it again. We need to harness the digital technologies that are in our pockets that expand our reach and offer functional medicine services to the public at affordable prices. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, this is the boring stuff, but the boring stuff is always the most important part of medicine. So it comes down to things like back-end administrative tools that make our practices less expensive to run, and cloud-based EMRs that let people work from home and share records with their patients. It's using services that exist like HealthWave to manage supplements. None of us became doctors and health coaches to be supplement dispensaries, but that's part of what we do. Those are the tools that we need to help people heal, so we need to get more efficient at that. And I think that if we take tracking outcomes and affordability seriously, even though they may seem like massive mountains to climb, we can use technology to climb those mountains, and we will get there, and we will see functional medicine scale to become what everybody expects to receive in their medical care.
So now you have an idea of the sort of genesis of where Dr. Berzin's thinking was coming from. It's my great pleasure to interview her for this forum to really discuss this whole journey. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this is because I think it serves a number of really, really important purposes for the broader functional medicine community. One, for those practitioners who are just starting, there are so many great lessons that Dr. Berzin shares about how to get started and how to think about building a clinic, building a brand, and starting to, reverse chronic illness at some sort of scale, from a technology perspective, from a staffing perspective, from a team perspective, from a brand perspective. Lots of great information there. There's also good ideas here on scaling. What does it take to open a first location, a second location, a third location? What are the lessons that she learned from that? That is relevant to quite a few practitioners in our community now who may be, busting at the seams from their first practice, looking to hire other doctors, looking to launch another location. And then third, most importantly, and why I thought this would be a great episode for everyone in our community, is that now Dr. Berzin has done something that very few people in our community have done. She has built a clinic that is successful in cash and now has convinced other organizations like insurance companies and employers to part with that cash in order to support people going through Parsley Health. And this is the next phase in the evolution of medicine, and why I thought it was critical for here. And you'll notice in the last year and a bit, we've had some content about the changing rules in healthcare and the changing insurance billing and why it might not be the worst situation to be in the insurance system. But this is something quite different, where Dr. Berzin has proved something out in cash and now has proved the outcomes to such a degree that she is now in a situation where insurance and employers will pay for it. This is a really important moment because it gives a signal of what's possible. And I think just in the same way that in the early days of the Functional Forum, I wanted to bring practitioners together and put aspirational people on stage so that they could see what it meant to be a successful functional medicine doctor and witness, that someone else was doing it and that this was attainable for them. I want to set the vision out here today for practitioners to see what's possible. If you build a clinic that is capable of reversing chronic disease at some sort of scale, there are definitely people out there who will want that for the people that they either insure, employ, part of their union, whatever it might be. And this is going to be my focus for the next 5 years, is working with practitioners like you to help you achieve that where you are in your community. So without further ado, check out this interview with Dr. Robin Berzin. Enjoy. Well, welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine, the Functional Forum. Dr. Robin Berzin, great to have you here.
Oh my gosh, great to be here. Nice to see you.
So I know it's, I'd like to actually wind it back, right, to the early days of Parsley Health. And I remember having a conversation. You had gone about essentially being the doctor, right, for the first 100 patients, and you had friends and family that you recruited in. And then there was this transition moment where this thing called Parsley Health was about to happen, and it was a service that you weren't the doctor in. And I just love to, because I know so many practitioners out in the community are hiring their first doctor, or, they've grown to a point where they're looking to do that. I just love to get your thoughts on your experience of that time and lessons that you learned from going from being essentially Robin Berzin, MD, that's called Parsley, to what is now the beginning of Parsley Health.
Oh, you're really bringing me back in time now. So this is like going from 2015 when I was Parsley Health, exactly as you said. I was the doctor, I was marketing, I was ops, I was legal, I was real estate, I was everything you can imagine. To 2016, when early in that year, I said, you know what, I'm ready. I have enough proof points here. We had actually scaled to, I think, about 350 members with just me. And I said, you know what, I think that the model makes sense. And I want to turn this into what I had always envisioned, which was a platform that could scale to bring root cause medicine to the country and possibly beyond. And so I think that having your own practice to start is so wonderful and important because it really grounds you in the work and the experience. You've done all the jobs, so you know what all the jobs are when you're starting to grow and hire those first people to start to take over some of those jobs. And yet at that moment, you also have to be ready to let go. And probably one of my biggest challenges in 2016 and 2017 as I was starting to build a technology team, an operations team, and hiring providers was learning how to hire the right people and then learning how to delegate. So if I think of some of the hardest and the biggest leaps and transitions that I've made in this entire thing, it was really that era.
So take us back, and I just, what are some lessons that you learned about, probably not everyone that is listening to this is going to hire a technology team, but just like on clinic operations, what were some thoughtful things that happened along the way, either lessons that you learned the hard way or things that you nailed the first time?
I would say it's really important to sort of work backwards from what you think great looks like. And you don't have to figure out what great looks like 10 years from now. You can figure out what great looks like a year from now. And so your practice, whoever you are, is going to be modeled around what are your goals financially? What is the lifestyle you want to live? Do you think you're a good manager, or do you think you want to hire somebody to be that operations and clinic manager? I think that's a really big fork in the road. I think I had some startup experience and some operational chops, so I felt like I could kind of hire a team and directly manage them. But I also know that for a lot of my provider friends and colleagues, they say, you know what? My best move is hire that awesome operational, whatever their title is, office manager or COO, somebody who's run a clinic before, and establish with them what great looks like. What, how much money do you want to make? What do you want your expenses to be? What do you want your profit margin to be? And what kinds of patients do you want to see? How are you going to acquire them? And find that person who can really run that for you. Because if you are going to be in a 1, 2, 3 person practice, and you're really thinking of yourself as primarily a clinician, a provider, you're going to be delivering care with most of the hours of your day. People don't realize when they start private practices, I think, and I hear this from providers we hire here at Parsley all the time. I gave it a go in private practice, and it wasn't that I'm a bad business person, and it's not because I couldn't, start my practice. It's that the sheer amount of hours and bandwidth that it takes to run payroll and do all the legal work around hiring people and real estate and, signing contracts with your EMR vendors. You want to know sort of who you are. And if you really want to be seeing patients most of the time, I highly advise, I think, hiring that person who can run all of those operations for you so that you're not feeling like you're trading off one for the other. And I think that at that early stage of going from just you to you plus, that's a big decision point, I believe.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that, and come face to face with that almost every day talking to practitioners. I'd like to talk a little bit about the marketing, because I remember also, in our conversations, you saying like selling Robin Berzin is a lot easier than selling this brand that, that is at least initially. What were your thoughts early on about the Parsley brand and what it was and what it represented, and then how has that evolved over time?
From day one, I called it Parsley Health because I started even my practice, it's basically Robin Berzin, but it's called Parsley Health back in 2015. I started that with an eye towards building something that could scale. So I never started in private practice personally to give that a whirl, and then later decided I wanted to do Parsley Health. I had a bit of startup experience, health tech experience from prior. And so for me, that vision and the model of what I was trying to do from day one was about building the brand that had nothing to do with Robin Berzin, MD. I actually really wasn't interested in personal celebrity or kind of being the focus of a medical practice. I was much more interested in, how do I build a brand? How do I build a scalable, technology-driven, smartly operationalized service that can reach lots and lots of people? Now, I did start just me and giving it a whirl so that I could kind of work out the kinks and prove to myself there was a there. And I did that. But, in those days, I didn't have venture backing the way we do now. I didn't have a marketing team. I didn't have any sort of personal recognition. I think I had a couple hundred Instagram followers, maybe, and Facebook followers that were like my friends. I really didn't have any sort of public presence. I wasn't in magazines or writing books or speaking publicly. Like, I was just truly a nobody. I was pretty fresh out of training, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so when I met you, right, and I had all these big ideas and I was like wide-eyed and had no idea what I was talking about, basically.
Yeah.
But I think what we did right was we gave Parsley a brand identity, and a brand identity for anyone thinking about whether it's your practice with your name on it or not your name on it is not fonts and colors and logos. I hear so many people confuse brand for things like fonts and colors and logos. Fonts and colors and logos in your website are a design-based implementation of your brand. But your brand, if you take a step back, is a conversation. Your brand is a conversation with an audience And you have that conversation in a lot of different places. You could have it through your website. You could have it on social media. You could have it through your office and the way that your office looks and where it's located. You could have it through flyers that you send out in the mail. You could have it through talks that you give or relationships with other providers who are going to be your referral partners. And what is that conversation? That conversation comes down to really one thing, which is what you stand for and what it is you're trying to share and offer in the world, like what your message is. And so at Parsley's goal was always to make root cause medicine approachable and easy to understand, affordable, impactful for people's lives, and something that could reach the people who are living every day in this country with heart disease and blood sugar problems and depression and infertility and autoimmune disease, all the things that we in the functional and root cause community treat. What I really wanted was a brand that could help make that type of medicine accessible, affordable, and resonant, and to have a conversation with that audience of what does it mean to begin to take care of your body as an individual in this new medical model. And so I think for us, that allowed from day one, we get a lot of accolades on our brand at Parsley, and we've never hired big outside branding firms. A lot of startups there's a bunch of names out there, but they hire these branding firms that tell them what their identity is. And we hired like a tiny little design firm, and we did a logo, and we did our initial website. My husband built our initial website. We hired somebody to help me with social media. I get asked on Instagram all the time, hey, who does your brand? Who does your social media at Parsley? Who does all your website? All these things. I'm like, we've always done it in-house, but I think the reason that it's certainly improved over time, don't get me wrong, in the early days, it was a little helter-skelter, but it's always been something that is deeply authentic to the message that we're sharing with the world. And that's what's created, I think, that thread of continuity for it that makes people really recognize it, even though, the early days we had a bunch of stock photos and we couldn't afford to do our own photo shoots and all that.
Yeah, I want to just reflect back to you that as you say that, what I've always appreciated about the Parsley social media is that simplicity of trying to communicate what this is, because there's so many words to this kind of care, right? And, even things, I'm a big Venn diagram guy, and I see that even just that simple way of communicating, this is this, and this is where they cross over, that kind of simplicity of communication, I think has helped a lot of people understand, what are we really talking about here? Are you a chiropractor? Because I've heard of that, but it doesn't seem like you are. What is this? And, I think so many people have had little tastes of holistic stuff. And to say, look, we are a medical practice. We do believe in getting to the root cause. We, are tech enabled, all the things that you are. And I just really appreciate now to hear you say that, how much intentionality went through to that, because I think that was really, really critical. I guess before we move on to any other topic, I know a lot of practitioners out there work with their spouse, right? The practitioner and the spouse is the office manager. I've met so many of those dynamic duos over the last 15 years or however long that I've been doing this. Just briefly, tell us a little bit about how that went for you and some of the positives and, some of the learnings, and then to what degree David still is involved.
I'm like, he's going to listen to this and want to kill me. I was so fortunate because when I started Parsley, we didn't have kids. I don't think we even had a dog, right? It was just the two of us. My husband was a tech executive at a big media company, and he was able, through his own skill set at the time, to help me get the website up and running, hire our first engineer, hire our first designer. And he hadn't really been in startups or anything, and he had absolutely zero healthcare or medical background. He was coming from straight, tech and media, but he was able to help me really get the business off the ground and handling some of the things that I I had co-founded one digital health startup already called Curator with a co-founder from medical school, an app that helps providers communicate and share clinical decision-making in health systems, which is still around and doing well, which is crazy. So I had some tech experience. I had a little experience of how to design an app, how to build something that was HIPAA compliant and secure for a healthcare setting, things that like as a doctor, I didn't have experience in, but I did have experience from my startup. I'd also been consulting in health tech for a while and had seen a lot of sort of what best practices and norms were in the space. So I want to be clear with everyone. Sometimes it feels like my ideas around this stuff came out of nowhere. I actually had some experiences before Parsley around the tech and startup world that really informed my thinking. But my husband was super helpful. David was amazing. And then he had a full-time job, so he was helping me on the side. And ultimately around 2018, we did our Series A, and we got our board for the first time, board of directors, so investors and people like that. And the company kind of became something much bigger, where at that point it wasn't going to work to have your partner or your spouse involved, and that was okay. I mean, he's been an incredible product and technology executive. I think there's two things there. One, you have to make sure that that working relationship isn't coming before or crowding out your personal relationship, because at the end of the day, your home and your family is everything. We have 3 kids now, and I literally can't imagine working with him every day and having our work life and our home life being one thing. That works for some of my friends really well. It would drive me bats. I need like a little bit of separation. In addition to that, I think that can work really well. And this is my opinion. I know different people, whatever works for you, and that's beautiful. I think that model works really well if you're a small shop, maybe 1 or 2 providers, you wholly own the business. Once you start to have outside investors and a board and you're building something that's expected to scale, I think it becomes difficult, because then your spouse or your partner is really then an employee to you if you're a CEO and you're their manager, everything that comes with that, and you're hiring out an executive team. And that's a little bit different of the setup. Where I see it works beautifully is my friends who are really running their practice, building their personal brand, and then their spouse happens to have an amazing skill set that can contribute to that. I mean, how beautiful is that? That is so
That is really beautiful. Well, I guess I want to get into the next phase here, because now you've got the one practice running, you've got another doctor in New York. It's early 2016 and I have moved to Venice Beach, and we end up doing an event at my house to like lead Parsley LA. And I guess I just love to get your thinking process on that, because the vast majority of practitioners in our space never go beyond one practice. But it seemed like early on, you were clear that this was going to be, in more than one location, in more than one city. And you just sort of had the drive that was where you were going. And I just like to know where that came from, and why LA, why San Francisco, and, what was the purpose in choosing those locations, and why you knew from the beginning that the next location wasn't going to be Westchester or Long Island or the Hamptons or anywhere else like that was closer to New York.
A lot of learnings there. Like I said, I definitely started Parsley because I built a P&L, profit and loss model for a business that I intended to scale. My goal, my passion, my dream has always been to make this medicine the standard of care, to get it into all the places that it never could have been. I think about training at Columbia and Mount Sinai, which are incredible medical institutions, and how root cause medicine just wasn't present. And it's this thing I'm so passionate about. And so for me, Parsley was always, I built this P&L, profit and loss model, for what I thought the company could ultimately look like, for how it could be a huge, really impactful sort of paradigm shifting healthcare company. I formed that entity, Parsley Health Inc., back in 2016. Parsley Health Inc. is the MSO. So Parsley Health has a superstructure like most healthcare companies do, where there's an MSO that is in relationship to the medical practices, the PCs themselves. So I formed that structure in 2016. That structure is the structure in which investors can invest and so forth. They can't really invest in a PC or PLLC structure in the same way. And when I was thinking about expanding, it was really important to me to show from day one that this was a national brand, not a local brand, that this would have providers who weren't me, who were operating in the same way, using the same protocols, the same software, the same brand, the same operations in other places. And I knew that based on my sort of market analysis, which was very basic at the time, but I knew that there was a strong market for this type of care in California and places like LA and San Francisco. So I didn't go to some place where I thought, no one's ever heard of this type of medicine before. Let's just give it a whirl. I went to places I knew that there was already an understanding of the medicine. There was already people serving the medicine. There was already people buying the medicine and who were looking for it. And I think that was the right decision. Looking back, we expanded too quickly to too many places before we had the operational infrastructure to do that, especially across the country. And so I don't look back and regret opening in LA and San Francisco, but I think opening both around the same time, looking back, I wish I had just done one, because I didn't realize how hard it would be to manage these new clinics from New York when I was in, because at that point, New York was growing and we had this organic momentum. But I was in New York. And so it was definitely a big leap and a lot of learning, some hard, some good, to have suddenly clinics and providers operating across the country kind of overnight. So words of caution to all of you out there, get it right in one place, then get it right in a second place, and really make sure those places are humming and profitable and make sense before you leap into the next. But you know what? I also was moving really fast at the time, and it also got our name out there and got our kind of recognition that we needed to start scaling. So, there were some silver linings.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk us through a little bit about how you thought about the Parsley clinical brand and how to get other doctors doing your brand of medicine, because there's so many different variations on the functional medicine root cause theme, right? Out in the market, there's niche specific stuff. There's all kinds of things that people bring in to their standard of care. How did you define the Parsley standard of care? And then how did you convince other doctors who are autonomous beings, right? to that this is the way that it should be done.
I think it goes back to, we had a really clear care philosophy from the beginning that everything that we were going to do was evidence-based, that no judgment to anyone out there, but because our mission was always to work with the conventional system at large, we wanted to avoid maybe some of the therapeutics, IVs, some of the things that have less strong of an evidence base, quite frankly, and are also, great for some patients, but aren't necessarily appropriate sort of for the average patient. So we didn't do those things because we were really focused on how do we bring this to people with high blood pressure and high cholesterol and hormonal imbalances, and getting this to people with some of the conditions that impact today 60% of American adults, right? So we wanted to make something that was approachable in that way. We were really sensitive to the concept of blending the best of conventional primary care with the best of functional medicine and the root cause medicine philosophy. So my perspective coming out of my training background, right or wrong, was that I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I didn't want to sort of reject all of the amazing conventional medicine that I'd learned. I wanted to incorporate the two together. So speaking of your Venn diagram, I wanted to be clear on what we were doing, what kind of medicine we were offering, what kind of medicine we weren't. And that led us to documenting our protocols really early, having a PhD in data science on board really early. We actually built our own patient-reported outcomes measure called the PSI, Parsley Symptom Index, which is now not only copyrighted, but we've published 3 publications, peer-reviewed publications on it. We use it in clinical practice to track outcomes, drive engagement, and as a support for patient engagement. And and the support for clinical practice, I should say. And so we started building some of those tools, right? The protocols, the Parsley Symptom Index that like everyone would be using. And then we got to this place where we were trying to hire, and it was really freaking hard. And I think you or Mark Hyman or somebody, I remember really early on when I told them about the idea, they go, where are you going to get the doctors? Like they were just like, how are you going to make this thing work? But for me, that was a big light bulb moment. And we ultimately, very early on in our trajectory, built our own in-house fellowship so that we could hire
I remember that.
Certified, awesome, smart, curious, primary care providers, internal med, family med, people who had maybe done an IFM course or had an integrative medicine board cert, or maybe none of that. They were coming straight out of wherever. One of my favorite, all my providers are favorites here, or all of our providers are our favorites here at Parsley. But one of my favorite stories of one of our providers here, she was a family medicine doc at one of the hospital systems here in New York City and had never practiced in this way at all, and came in with zero, but just super smart and super curious and really got what we were trying to do. And by developing this in-house fellowship, we were able to train her. And then she's here like 4 years later. She has a full patient panel. She has an NPS of like 90. She has incredible outcomes for her patients, and she's one of our model providers. And so to be able to deliver the care in a standardized way, I think we had to, to sum it up, build some tools like that would enable folks who maybe they were coming here from just primary care fields, maybe they were coming here from another functional practice. But to your point, there's a lot of versions of that out there. So we created a toolkit and a training program that would allow them to say, hey, nothing's wrong with anything you've been done before, but here's how we do it here.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'd love to just get into a little bit, over the years, we've had some incredible interactions as you've been going through your journey, in person, and then text messages here, there, and everywhere. And one particular moment that I remember is March 20th, 2020. And it's, COVID has happened. And I pop up on my screen and it says, hey, anyone could do telemedicine in any state. And that's the change in law. And I remember texting you and I was like, I think this is good for you, right? And, something along that. We had that conversation back and forth, and just love to chat about COVID and the implications and sort of the ups and downs for a person with a very clear plan, projecting things out year to year. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do next year. I know that you have that sort of clarity about where you're going. And now this gets, thrown in, and there's all kinds of exciting things about it. And then there's all kinds of terrifying things about it for someone on such a clear trajectory. And I just love to get your thoughts about COVID and how you responded to it, and what the implications were for Parsley and still are, I guess.
The summary of these, what is it now? 3 years, we're in 2023, since 2020 has been, I don't know what the saying is, but whatever God laughs at all your plans is, whatever that saying is, that's my summary of these 3 years. Okay. We built our two first beautiful brick and mortar clinics in New York and Los Angeles, and they launched both in 2019. And we had thousands of people on the wait list, and we were growing faster than we could hire. And our projections, which now I just might as well have incinerated, for 2020 showed those two clinics growing quite substantially. And then also on top of that, us launching in our first 10 or so states for fully remote care. And we had put together a plan for telehealth-based care for the program. We had done all of the infrastructure work, all of the work around technology and operations and licensure. And, then and now, there are certain things that you need to do to be able to ensure that you're compliant if you want to have your first person visit if you want to establish care remotely, right? And especially if you're MDs, right? If you're MDs, DOs, NPs, PAs. So if you're, regulated in that way, some of these things, for example, don't apply to health coaching, but they do apply to medical services. And so we've done all that work, and March comes, and we had February 4th or something launched our first 8 states for fully remote care. So people could start with remotely. And at the same time, and I look back on this moment, it was one of the hardest moments of my career. I had to decide to close the clinics. And my team had gotten there. They were like, Robin, it's time to close the clinics. I mean, this is like early, mid-March 2020. And I didn't want to. And I was like, we are providers. We have a responsibility to show up. We are delivering patient care. I need to stand on the same, front lines as my friends who are still at the hospitals in town. And no one knew what was going on at that point. Is it safe to keep the clinics open? I sent an Uber to a buddy of mine's house in Brooklyn. He was he had become a gastroenterologist because he had a box of N95s and we didn't have any at our clinics, so that I could supply our providers and myself and the teams and clinics with N95s. Like, it was just absolute chaos. And I really didn't want to close the clinics. I felt like that was not the role I wanted to play, at least initially. And of course, as I began to understand what was going on and our teams understood, the team really had to sort of push me and say, we have to close. We're not a hospital. We're not an emergency room. This is the right thing to do for our teams. And ultimately we reopened safely, in June, and I think New York and maybe July in LA. But not only was I resistant because of all the reasons I just said, but I think on some level I was also resistant because 2019 had been this huge year and the paint was barely dry on these things that we had just launched and had all these for. So I felt guilty. I felt conflicted. I felt so many things in that moment. Also, we were under tremendous pressure from investors at that time, to make cuts. And we made cuts in the business at that time, not on our clinical side, but on our non-clinical side, to conserve capital, which are things that you as a business leader sometimes have to do, as your projections and reality don't match. Sometimes you have to cut. And that was really hard. And I had never had to do that before either. So it was a moment of incredible learning and growth for us. What I couldn't have imagined, though, was, and it took a while, right? Because our brick and mortar growth went to 0 overnight. But then we had this new opportunity that we had just set up for ourselves in telehealth that we were actually ready to meet.
Yeah.
And so it was this sort of lopsided, mixed picture. It wasn't all good and it wasn't all bad.
That's really amazing. And I'm sure that during that process, I mean, if you come back to the original vision, right, which is like, I want to make this something that anyone can get to and really change the model of care, to have that moment where it's like, oh, this beautiful thing that I created. And I know how proud you were of and are still of those locations. And, I know speaking to you earlier, like it was really about trying to create a setting where health can happen. It doesn't look like a hospital. It doesn't look like a medical facility. It feels, the energy is like a healing space, and how beautiful that is. I guess I just wanted to share, that, to step into it and take those hard choices, and just want to share my appreciation for that, because I know it was such a tricky time, for so many people trying to work out what to do. I guess I want to come to now where we are today, because, ultimately it's interesting, in 2019 when my partner Gabe passed away, just kind of came to a realization that, we might have helped, 1,000 clinics or, a bit more than that, maybe go functional, right, over the last 5 years with the evolution of medicine, and felt great about that, man. There's like a functional medicine clinic in every city, and now there's these other clinics where you can get everywhere, and felt solid about that, but really just felt like the access is still not there, right? It's still not there for the people who are on commercial insurance, or never mind Medicare, Medicaid. And so here we are at this moment. I mean, the announcement that you guys made that now you're in network with 10 million people can access Parsley in some sort of way. talk us through your thinking on that, as because so many doctors, and you're not like this because you didn't go in that journey, but so many doctors come to having a cash model because like they're done with insurance. They don't want to integrate it with it at all. And you obviously started in cash, right from the beginning. And I didn't know, I guess, actually there is one more text that we had, which was I don't know, we don't need to talk about that.
I think it's a very unfair fight, by the way, for anyone who's listening. James has all these like insider text.
Yeah, insider. Yeah, I guess, no, yeah. Just, I guess my question is, was this always the plan? And then how did it come together? And where is it now? And, what can happen for Parsley in the next 3 years based on this announcement?
So this was always the plan. I knew I wanted to start in cash pay because I felt like what we were doing was a little bit radical. And I knew that if we day one tried to fit what we were doing into the existing model of fee-for-service healthcare, we would too early in our journey be sort of imprinted by that. We would be pushed by the way that the financials worked to operate a certain way. And I wanted to really figure out the model and the medicine and how it was standardized and to be able to build a great experience. But like I said earlier, we had a PhD in data science on staff from day one, even though, we didn't have any data at the beginning. But the reason for that was strategic. We wanted to get outcomes data that would ultimately allow us to go to the healthcare system. We have a $4 trillion, healthcare system in the United States. It's like 17% of GDP. United Healthcare alone, I think, is 1% of US GDP or something bananas like that. This is a monster industry. And if you want to be a big company and you want to reach the people who need you the most, you got to work with that industry. That's the end of the story and the beginning of the story. And I knew that, but I didn't want to sort of be under that pressure day one. I wanted to sort of build it, figure it out, get it right. And also show with real outcomes data that were independently validated, meaning like not just internal to us, but also validated by the external parties and actuarial firms that, analyze these types of things, that we were moving the needle for people with chronic conditions and real healthcare needs, that we weren't for the worried well, that we weren't a wellness destination. And what we showed in that data set, which we unearthed and sort of did all the work on and had a white paper published and a large analysis done in 2021, we showed that we are, first of all, our patient base, 80% have 2+ conditions, 60% have 3 or 4. They cost twice as much on average as the average commercially insured. And Parsley services are driving real cost savings and health benefits in that population. I could get into the nitty-gritty, but I'm just going to summarize it here that we drive cost savings and benefits. And the reality of our healthcare system today is that if the health insurance companies or Medicare, Medicaid, or the self-insured employers who represent the majority of the commercially insured, book of business, or a big part of it, are going to pay for something like this, they want to see ROI. Because we are more expensive than just a primary care doctor that's going to spend 15 minutes with you and hand you a stack of prescriptions and send you out the door and refer you to 6 specialists. We do cost more than that, a little bit more upfront. But what we've been able to show is that this care model not only is the way that medicine should be, which I hear when I give the pitch to benefits leaders at big companies and health plan folks, and I hear all the time, gosh, isn't this the way medicine should be? And I say, yeah. But what's really even cooler than that is that we have real outcomes data that's allowing us to show that it isn't just the way it should be. It also is high value, ROI driving, and the way medicine needs to go if we're going to bend the cost curve that everyone constantly sort of talks about and complains about in healthcare. So it's really exciting. And so that was always the plan. I didn't really know how long it would take us to get there. It took maybe longer than I wish it had. Looking back, sometimes I wish I'd gone for that sooner. But here we are. We didn't really start that journey until end of 2021. into 22. So it's been like a year and a half, a little longer. And I'm really proud to say that not only are we in network for over 10 million people in New York and California at rates that we've negotiated because of our outcomes data, reimbursement rates, but that we're also in conversation right now with 5 health plans on value-based arrangements, which would cover the full scope of our services. And we are now live with self-insured employers, some of the biggest self-insured employers in our country, telecoms, hotel groups, school systems, food delivery, laboratory companies, chemical makers, energy companies. And what's amazing and gratifying about that is, the employer is paying our fees on behalf of the employees, so the employee's not paying for it. And that is just to reach people who work at these companies, who most of whom, based on the average salaries at these companies, are never affording one of the cash pay practices out there, is literally my dream come true. Like, it's here.
That's it.
The pain of getting here, I will tell everyone listening, has been somewhat brutal.
Yeah.
So don't envy me, because I just summed up what has been like 2 years of work and a massive slog and some major disappointments and heartbreak along the way in like a 5-minute spiel.
Yeah. Right. So I just want to bring it back. So earlier this summer, we had an interview with Dr. Robert Pearl, who turned around Kaiser, right, in 15 years. And, his whole thesis was that essentially once medicine moves to capitation, the services of the people in our community, and obviously you with the biggest footprint, become the most valuable things in medicine, because no one else knows how to reverse a chronic illness and the lifetime cost of a chronic illness. There are people with spreadsheets who know what that is. And if you can turn off lupus after a year and it would have cost $10 million over the next 20 years, your thing is insanely valuable. And I guess I would just love, as a final word, for you just to share for all those practitioners who are out there who have, built their own little world of care and have done something really powerful in the local community, just kind of what the future holds for the people that have stayed the course and built something repeatable and are reversing chronic illness in their community.
I just think that out there, everyone doing that is doing the good work, right? And whether you're reaching 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people or tens of thousands of people, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Every single person who you help heal or shift the trajectory of their disease in a meaningful way, or just empower to live a healthier life because they understand their bodies and how to take care of them, that has a huge ripple effect. And so I don't think small or large or solo practice or group practice or tech-enabled, like any of it really matters. I think keep doing that. And the one thing I encourage everyone to do is try to just track some data. Even just if you have a spreadsheet and you keep track of your patients and who they are and how old they are and what their conditions are and where they started and where they're ending up with their care with you, that data is really valuable. And I think sometimes we're in the trenches as providers, we're doing the good work, we're seeing patient after patient, and we don't have time for that stuff, or we sort of forget to pick our heads up and say, even if this is a couple hundred people, this is a population that I am treating, that I am moving the needle. And whether it's for yourself, or you want to publish a case study, or you ultimately want to be part of a network and show that your care model is driving value, I think it's really important to do that. That's the one thing I see providers not doing. And there's a lot of sort of off-the-shelf ways of doing that today. Because I think that this model is going to continue to grow and continue to scale, but I don't think that it can scale in a cash pay model. I think we're reaching the maximum of where that can go. I think we have reached the maximum of where that can go. And so I'm hopefully part of a small effort over here at Parsley, banging our heads in my head against the wall along the way, to open some doors so that get this care model into the mainstream, because that's really what it's going to take if we want to really have that kind of broader impact that I think we'd all love to see.
Absolutely. Well, look, I want to just wrap up this by saying just how much I appreciate you. You know, I feel really proud to know you and to have watched and have this like inside scoop on what's going on. One of the sad things that I have about leaving New York in 2015 and making that choice is that, you remember, just that we don't see each other as much as we could or should or used to before I left. But in a certain way, I'm just, it's been great to see your star rise. I know it hasn't been easy along the way. And I definitely just want to share with all practitioners that this journey that you've gone through is that there's a testament to your inner strength and courage, to go through this, because it's hard and it's not over yet, right? The journey, the mission to get this to everyone is still happening and is still in its infancy in a certain way. And, but I know that you're, really committed to it. I mean, and I don't just feel that through what you say, your actions, show everyone that you are fully committed to the mission. And I just want to share how proud I am of you, how proud I am of our friendship, and how excited I am that I feel like you said, we're all on the same team. We're doing it together. There's so many people out there that care. And it's not just providers, it's patients that care. They want this. And it takes people like you and the other people in our community to really work this out. The first thing we have to do is to get people better and the ripple effect of that. But yeah, like you said, tracking outcomes and realizing that what you're doing has broader implications than just the person you're working with. And I think that's a great message for everyone. So thank you so much for everything. Thank you for sharing this. I've actually wanted to make this episode for a while, which is Parsley Health and Robin Berzin, the one woman evolution of medicine, because you did it, you're doing it. I'm proud of you.
One woman. Thanks to you for being such a champion of this community and all the providers I got to work with and learn from, whether if it was at an Institute for Functional Medicine conference or training or spending time shadowing and training with Mark Hyman and Jeff Morrison. I am so grateful to all the people who have carved a path or just taught me something along the way. Patrick Hanaway has been an incredible mentor and someone I've learned so much from, especially when it comes to data. And we've actually published something together, which was really cool. I'm a big nerd over here, people. So I'm really proud of that. And we're still out here. This past year of this business, I'll be honest with you, it's been the hardest year of them all. This has been the hardest year. The transition we're making from consumer and cash pay into enterprise sometimes feels like I'm in a bikini with flip-flops and I'm walking up Everest, falling down on my butt. But you know what? I got this far and we got this far. We have a team of over 150 people, including our providers and coaches and RNs and everybody else who works with us here. And it's an incredible group, and it's definitely not a one-woman show at this point. It's all of those people, the community around us, our patients who believed in us, the people who give us feedback and tell me, you know what, I didn't like this aspect of your service. It sucked. All of it. But just one step at a time. And for anyone listening who's, building or just hiring your first provider or just getting started, or even in a moment where maybe you're losing the faith, just one day at a time and keep going, because it's not easy. None of it is. But if it gives you meaning and fulfillment, then just keep at it. And it can take different shapes and twists and turns, and maybe it will surprise you.
Wonderful. Well, this has been the Functional Forum. We've been here with Dr. Robin Berzin of Parsley Health. We'll have more details in the show notes. I'm sure we'll have a link to your hiring pages, because I know that as things grow, there's always a need for more doctors in the Parsley brand. And hopefully this is inspiring to some of you that you want to work with Robin and be part of her team and take this where it needs to go, because there's a lot more people that need this care. We're only scratching the surface. So we'll put all those details in the show notes. Thank you for doing this. Much love. Good luck. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Coming up next month, we have a functional forum that we will be recording at the Functional Pharmacy Symposium. It's coming up in Nashville in a couple of weeks. Really interested and excited about that. And then coming up in November, we will be live in Orange County, California for a live forum at one of our Functional Forum meetup groups. Very excited about that. And we have lots of other interesting things coming to you later this fall. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.